So Summer of '84 was directed by Francois Simard, Anouk Whissell, and Yoann-Karl Whissell. I apologize if I mispronounced any of those names. I've wanted to do videos about movies that are overlooked or underappreciated for a while now, just because there aren't any other new movies coming out. This is not going to be like my traditional reviews where I break the movie down by plot, character, and theme. Instead, I'm going to freeball it a bit more and go through the movie in roughly chronological order and tell you what I like and don't like. I won't spoil anything immediately. There will be a spoiler section of this video, but I'll give you a time code to skip it if you want. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So this movie follows 4 teenage boys as they try and figure out if one of their neighbors is a serial killer. I've heard comparisons to Stranger Things and Disturbia as far as the tone of this movie goes, and while yeah, I'll admit that there are definitely elements of both of those things in here, it manages to be original enough so that it's still interesting. I really love how the opening monologue of this movie sets up everything that comes after. I also really love how the opening scene of the movie sets up the rest of the movie. There's the pictures on Mackey's wall, there's the room in his basement with the lock on it, there's how over nice he seems to be. All of these things come back at some point in the movie. Let's talk about our 4 lead characters. The banter between them is pretty good and they each have their own distinct personality. While these characters easily could have been just 80s nostalgia cliches, the movie takes its time to build upon each of the characters to make them more layered. The main character, Davy, could fall into the category of just being a nerd. He has aspirations to be the next Spielberg, he is obsessed with pop culture, he has a crush on the pretty girl next door. But then the layers are peeled back, and it's revealed that he's actually really good at doing detective work and kind of figuring things out and putting pieces together and drawing conclusions, and there's just more to him than the archetypal nerd. Then there's a character like Woody, who could just be the cliche fat kid, like Chunk from Goonies or Vern from Stand By Me, but instead we learn that he has an overworked mother, and that while he does love his mother, he sometimes feels like she's a burden on him. Then we have the character of Eats, who could just be a cliche greaser like Danny from Grease or Kiefer Sutherland in Stand By Me, but instead we learn that he has parents that argue a lot and a brother that he doesn't dislike but doesn't really know how to connect with, and that he's really broken underneath because he doesn't really understand how to connect with other people. And finally we have Faraday, who once again could just be a cliched geek, but instead we get to see how compassionate he is for his friends, and that even though sometimes he doesn't really get along with them, he does deeply care for them. Nikki, who's the main character's love interest, starts out just being kind of a cliche girl next door, but over the course of the movie, the layers are pulled back and she becomes a more complex character. I love how she is aware that the main character, Davy, is just utterly enthralled with her and kind of pokes fun at that throughout the movie. I also want to talk about Rich Sommer's performance as the neighbor, whose name is Mackey. His performance in this movie is so good, because there's times where he's really nice, but then times where also he seems to be a little bit too nice, and it constantly leaves the audience guessing as to whether or not he's actually the killer. I really love the clues this movie gives us as to whether or not Mackey is actually the killer. They all give the audience just enough information to be suspicious without making it super easy to guess who the killer actually is. I also really love the way this movie is directed. The directors use lenses in a really interesting way. There's lots of zooms and lots of rack and pull focuses that help reveal information. They also managed to make a lot of the scenes, especially the third act, very suspenseful. There's a scene involving the main characters driving a car, and I was on the edge of my seat throughout that entire scene. So yeah, skip to this time on the clock if you want to avoid spoilers. First off, I'm just going to discuss the handful of negatives I have with this movie, because there are a few. The parents in this movie are really stupid. There's a point in the movie where the main kid goes and admits to his parents that they've been spying on the neighbor and that he thinks the neighbor might be the killer. The parents, being stupid, then make the kid go over to the neighbor's house and make the kid admit everything. And that scene honestly made me facepalm, because no parent would make their kid do that. Just on the slightest chance that their kid is right, they might ground their kid, they might tell their kid not to look into it anymore, but they're not going to make their kid admit to a potential serial killer that they know he's a potential serial killer, no matter how absurd the evidence is. While the child performances in this movie aren't anywhere bad as, say, The Last Airbender, they're nowhere near as good as something like Stranger Things. You can tell that the actors are inexperienced. Also, when the kids go into Mackie's house, they find a room in his basement that's meant to look exactly like Mackie's room from when he was a kid, and it never really explains why he has this room set up to look like his childhood bedroom. Also, I don't really believe that Mackie could sneak into Davy's house and carry 2 bodies downstairs without the parents noticing. I just don't. But that's it. Those are all the negatives I have, and those 3 things are pretty small. The third act of this movie is what truly defines it as being a really, really good movie. Don't get me wrong, the first 2 acts are still good, but the third elevates it to a whole nother level. It subverts the cliches of this type of movie. At the end of the movie, it's revealed that Mackie is actually the killer, and that he had a kid locked up in his basement that he was gonna kill. The kids take the evidence to the cops, and the cops put an APB out on Mackie. However, Mackie manages to sneak into Davy's house and capture Davy and Woody. He then takes them out to the beach and starts playing a sadistic game of manhunt with them. This scene is suspenseful as absolute crap. My heart was pounding. On top of that, Mackie actually kills one of the kids, and I'm surprised the movie had the balls to do that. Because as much as I love things like Stranger Things, Goonies, or E.T., those movies do not have the balls to kill off one of their child characters. They're not going to do that. But then comes what is, in my opinion, the most scary scene in the movie, where Mackie gets Davy and he's about to kill him, but then he says, you know what? I'm not gonna kill you. You ruined my life. So instead, I'm gonna leave you alive, but one day, you don't know when, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna kill you. And then he escapes, leaving Davy to wonder when and where Mackie will come back for him. This scene is creepy as absolute crap, because sometimes not knowing is scarier than knowing. The final scene of the movie depicts Davy doing his paper route. While he's walking on this paper route, he sees Nikki waving goodbye to him as she moves away. He sees the 2 other surviving kids, Eats and Faraday, taking down the remains of their treehouse. And the monologue he gives in the final scene of the movie is the same one he gave at the beginning of the movie, only in reverse order. So overall, while this movie could just be riding the Stranger Things and It train of the 80s nostalgia bait, it manages to carve out its own identity and subvert the tropes that we're coming to expect from this type of movie. I'm going to give Summer of '84 a positive review. The characters are really interesting, the plot constantly keeps you guessing, and it is suspenseful as can be. So yeah, this movie is definitely worth checking out if you haven't watched it already. If this video does well, I'll do even more videos about movies that I think are underappreciated. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below. But as always, thanks for watching, be sure to subscribe, bye.